From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
The Norwegian Nobel Committee has decided that the Nobel Peace Prize for 2011 is to be divided in 3 equal parts between Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, Leima Bowie, and Tawakkol Karman for their non-violent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work.
Until now, only 12 women have won the Nobel Peace Prize. This time it goes to 3 women. One of them, Yemeni activist Tawakkol Karman, may be the youngest Nobel recipient ever. Then it was 10 years ago today when then President George W. Bush announced the beginning of the Afghan war.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes against al-Qaeda terrorist training camps and military installations of the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. These carefully targeted actions are designed to disrupt the use of Afghanistan as a terrorist base of operations and to attack the military capability of the Taliban regime.
We'll speak with journalist Anand Gopal, who spent years reporting on Afghanistan. And we go to Afghanistan to speak with Reena, the pseudonym of an Afghan activist in Rawah. Then, civil rights icon passes.
People who believe what they believe and would stand for it anywhere, I thought they were saints of the highest magnitude.
Fred Shuttlesworth, the civil rights activist, and legal scholar Derek Bell both died this week. We'll speak with the Reverend Jesse Jackson in Detroit. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Actions inspired by New York's Occupy Wall Street continue to spring up across the United States. As of Friday morning, the website Occupy Together, a hub for nationwide events in solidarity with Occupy Wall Street, reported gatherings in 840 cities. On Thursday, activists in Washington, D.C. kicked off the October 2011 protests by occupying Freedom Plaza.
Stop investing in privatization. We need to start worrying about the 99% of the population. We need to start investing our money into social welfare programs and worrying about the middle to lower class, because we are not truly a great nation until all of us are strong and all of us are prospering.
Well, I'm so appalled at the lies that go on at every level, and this was something I could do. Some of my friends say that it's just a replay of what we did during Vietnam, but you know, that did have some effect, and I'm really hopeful that this, and the people at Wall Street, that this will actually move us to do something.
As in New York, demonstrators have come to Washington, D.C. from across the country, and some are taking part in their first-ever political demonstration. One woman who traveled from Kansas held a sign that read, quote, "Lost my job, found an occupation." In San Francisco, protesters are defiantly resisting a police attempt to break up an encampment in front of the Federal Reserve Bank. On Thursday, dozens of officers in riot gear surrounded the camp, removing tents, sleeping bags, and other items belonging to protesters. But organizers say over 100 people are still holding the area despite losing their belongings. At the White House, President Obama weighed in on the Occupy Wall Street protests for the first time. Speaking at a news conference, Obama said he understands the protesters' frustration, but ultimately believes in the financial sector.
I think it expresses the frustrations that the American people feel, that we had the biggest financial crisis since the Great Depression, and yet you're still seeing some of the same folks who acted irresponsibly trying to fight efforts to crack down on abusive practices that got us into this problem in the first place. So yes, I think people are frustrated, and you know, the protesters are giving voice to a more broad-based frustration about how our financial system works. Now keep in mind, I have said before, and I will continue to repeat, we have to have a strong, effective financial sector in order for us to grow.
President Obama, meanwhile, has given backing to a new proposal that would impose a 5% surtax on income above $1 million. Senate Democrats announced the measure this week as an alternative to Obama's proposed tax increases on incomes above $200,000 for individuals and $250,000 for families. At his news conference, Obama said he's fine with the alternative approach. The Nobel Peace Prize has been awarded to a trio of women: Yemeni activist Tawakkol Karman, Liberian President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, and Liberian peace activist Layman Bowie. The three women were cited, quote, for their nonviolent struggle for the safety of women and for women's rights to full participation in peace-building work. The trio of laureates follow only a dozen other women among 85 men to have won the prize over its 110-year history. We'll have more on this year's Nobel Peace Prize recipients after headlines. Fighters with Libya's governing National Transitional Council have launched a new assault on the town of Sirte in an attempt to wrest control from loyalists of ousted leader Muammar Gaddafi. Many civilians have been trapped in clashes over the past 3 weeks. Gaddafi, meanwhile, has released a new audio message urging supporters to rise up against the NTC. At a meeting in Belgium, NATO Secretary General Anders Fogh Rasmussen said he thinks the Libyan conflict is near its final stages.
It's clear that the end is in sight. Gaddafi's forces are fighting for a lost cause. The threat to civilians is fading away. The recent positive developments in Libya are irreversible.
Hundreds of Afghans marched through Kabul Thursday in a protest marking the 10-year anniversary of the Afghan war. Protesters chanted slogans including "No to Occupation" and "Americans Out," while holding pictures of slain war victims. We'll have more on the 10-year mark in Afghanistan later in the broadcast. The United Nations says the death toll from the crackdown on pro-democracy protests in Syria has now topped 2,900. The figure marks an increase of 200 from the previous estimate. Syrian human rights activists say the toll is in fact higher and that some 30,000 people have also been imprisoned since protests began earlier this year. Tensions are high in the occupied territories amidst a wave of attacks by Israeli settlers and troops. Israeli police say they've arrested suspects accused of vandalizing and setting fire to 2 Palestinian mosques. The mosques were hit as part of a settler-backed price tag campaign, a vow to target Palestinians in response to the dismantling of unauthorized outposts outside of the major Israeli settlement blocks that already carve up Palestinian land. The settlers recently extended their vandalism to an Israeli army base in the West Bank, an incident that may have spurred the Israeli military to finally take action. No one had been arrested in any of the previous arson attacks in the West Bank over the past year. Meanwhile, Israeli soldiers fired tear gas and stun grenades at a crowd of Palestinian youths who had gathered to protest an Israeli demolition of a Palestinian home near Hebron. A member of the family owning the property denounced the Israeli military.
They raided us around 6 a.m. Since the morning, occupation forces and their intelligence forces came here. They imposed curfew to prevent anyone from reaching the house, and they isolated us in the house and beat up the men. Then they demolished the house. I say, God will take revenge on them.
A Pakistani government panel investigating the U.S. killing of Osama bin Laden has recommended what it calls high treason charges against a doctor who worked for the CIA. Dr. Shekhar Afridi has been accused of running the vaccination program that the CIA used to track bin Laden down. The U.S. has been lobbying the Pakistani government for his release. At the White House, President Obama weighed in on U.S. ties with Pakistan, saying he agrees with Admiral Mike Mullen's recent claim that Pakistani intelligence has ties to the militant group blamed for a series of attacks inside Afghanistan.
Persuade Pakistan is that it is in their interest to have a stable Afghanistan, that they should not be feeling threatened by a stable, independent Afghanistan. We've tried to get conversations between Afghans and Pakistans going more effectively than they have been in the past. But we've still got more work to do. And there is no doubt that there's some connections that the Pakistani military and intelligence services have with certain individuals that we find trouble. And I've said that publicly, and I've said it privately to Pakistani officials as well.
The standoff over public education in Chile has intensified with the largest police crackdown in months. On Thursday, Chilean police used water cannons and tear gas in an attempt to remove protesters from a main plaza in the capital, Santiago. Tens of thousands of students had marched to the plaza after talks broke down with the Chilean government. New Zealand's warning of an environmental disaster over fears of an oil spill from a stranded container ship. The vessel, named Rena, hit a reef earlier this week and has already set off a lengthy oil slick. A New Zealand official says the accident could prove to be the country's most significant maritime pollution disaster in decades. And back in the United States, California has pulled out of talks between the attorneys general from all 50 states and the nation's largest banks over the bank's foreclosure abuses to force thousands of people out of their homes. California Attorney General Kamala Harris says she will not agree to a settlement with the banks because the proposal under discussion is, quote, inadequate, unquote, and fails to hold bank executives accountable for their practices. Harris says she'll negotiate a settlement with the banks outside of the joint track pursued by the other states. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy.